Right now, as you watch this, a single feature in the atmosphere is doing 4 different things to 4 different parts of the United States at the same time. It is drowning the South. It is baking the West. It is loading a violent storm outbreak over the middle of the country. And out over the Pacific, it is steering a hurricane toward Hawaii. 4 hazards, 1 structure, and most of the coverage you have seen is treating them as 4 separate stories, because that is how weather is usually reported. 1 map, 1 region, 1 afternoon at a time. They are not 4 stories. They are 1. And once you see the thing that connects them, you cannot unsee it, and you will understand the week ahead better than almost anyone around you. That is what the next few minutes are for. Let me start with the single sentence that explains all of it. There is a dome of high pressure, an enormous ridge, parked over the central and southern United States, and it is not moving. The National Weather Service has it anchored over the central and southern plains, and the forecast keeps it there into next week. That one stubborn feature is the engine behind everything I'm about to show you. Here is why a stuck ridge matters, because this is the part that makes the rest of the video make sense, and it takes about a minute. A ridge of high pressure is a dome of sinking air. Air that sinks warms up, dries out, and kills off cloud cover. That is why the inside of a ridge is hot, clear, and quiet. Nothing happens directly underneath one. If that were the whole story, this would just be a heat wave. But a ridge is not a wall standing still, it is a circulation. In the northern hemisphere, the air flows clockwise around a high-pressure center, which means the dome has a rim, an outer edge where the wind is moving fast. And that rim is where all the violence lives. Hold on to that word, the rim. Because you are going to watch it show up over and over in places thousands of miles apart, and every single time it is the same feature doing the work. Under the center of the dome, the heat. On the rim of the dome, the storms. And the same clockwise spin that builds the rim is what reaches out over the water and nudges a hurricane along. One feature. That is the whole key to the week. Now let me show you each face of it. Start with the water, because it is already happening. And it has already turned deadly this week. You probably heard that Tropical Storm Bertha came ashore on the Gulf Coast and then fell apart over Texas. That is true. Bertha is gone. She dissipated into a weak depression and then into nothing. But here is what almost no one told you. The storm died. The water did not. Bertha dumped an enormous plume of tropical moisture into the atmosphere over the south, and when she dissipated, that moisture did not just evaporate and disappear, it got left behind. And then it ran straight into the southern edge of our ridge. Remember the rim. On the southern flank of that high-pressure dome, there is a front, a boundary between air masses, and that front has stalled. It has stopped moving. And a stalled front is a machine for turning moisture into floods, because it forces that wet air to rise over and over in the same place. So the leftover water from a storm that no longer exists is now being wrung out over the south. This week, thunderstorms exploded across the deep south and dropped 1 to 2 inches of rain in a matter of hours, and flash flood warnings went up over major metro areas. And the Weather Prediction Center has kept a risk of excessive rainfall going across the eastern Carolinas and stretching back through the lower Mississippi and Tennessee valleys, with moisture levels in the atmosphere running close to 3 standard deviations above normal for late July. In plain terms, there is nearly as much water in the air over parts of the South right now as that region ever holds this time of year. And I want to be honest about the mechanism here, because it matters and because a lot of coverage gets it wrong. It is tempting to say Bertha is flooding the South. That is not quite right. Bertha supplied the moisture, but the thing wringing it out, the thing making it dangerous up in the house, is the stalled front on the rim of the ridge. If Bertha had never formed, that front would still be sitting there. She loaded the gun. The ridge is what is pulling the trigger day after day over the same ground. That distinction is not me being picky. It tells you something practical. This does not end when the tropical storm's name disappears from the map. It ends when the front finally moves, and a front stuck under a blocking ridge is in no hurry to go anywhere. That is why the flood threat has lingered for days and will keep lingering. So that is face number 1, the South, drowning in the ghost of a storm that is already dead. Now go to the other side of the dome, because while the South can't stop raining, the West and the South Central states can't cool down. Directly under the center of the ridge, that sinking, drying air is doing exactly what sinking, drying air does. It is building a heat wave, and not a short one. The Weather Prediction Center is now describing a lengthy heat wave for much of the West and the South, running well into next week. This is not a 2-day hot spell that breaks with the next cold front. There is no cold front coming because the ridge is blocking them all. The same ground bakes day after day with nothing to reset it. And here's the number I want you to actually pay attention to, because it is the one that kills people, and it is almost never the one in the headline. It is not the afternoon high. It is the overnight low. Think about how your body handles heat. During the day, you absorb it. At night, when the temperature drops, you shed it. Your core cools back down. Your heart stops working overtime, and you reset for the next day. The night is the recovery window. It is the whole reason a normal hot day is survivable. Now take that recovery window away. Under a heat dome, the nights don't cool off. The overnight low stalls in the upper 70s and just sits there. And when that happens, you never get back to baseline. You start each day a little more overheated than the last, and the strain compounds night after night until something gives. This is not theory. It is the single mechanism behind the deadliest heat disasters in American history. The 1995 Chicago heat wave killed hundreds of people, and what turned it into a mass casualty event was not the afternoon temperature, it was the nights that refused to cool. The 2021 Pacific Northwest heat dome killed an estimated 600 people across the region by the exact same mechanism. In both cases, the afternoon highs made the headlines, and the warm nights filled the morgues. Heat is the deadliest form of weather in this country in an average year. Deadlier than tornadoes, deadlier than hurricanes, and it does most of its killing quietly, indoors, in the days after the peak. So when I tell you a heat wave is settling over the West and the South and staying there, I'm not describing an inconvenience. I'm describing the most dangerous and most underestimated and face of this entire pattern. Watch the overnight lows. That is the number that matters. That is face number 2. Now the rim goes back to work, and this is the one that is coming. Move to the northern and eastern edge of the dome, the top of the rim, and the clockwise flow turns into a fast river of wind coming down out of Canada, aimed at the middle of the country. Forecasters call this northwest flow, and it is one of the most productive setups for violent summer storms there is. Here is why it is so dangerous. That fast wind aloft comes barreling down into hot, wet, unstable air that has been sitting under the edge of the ridge, cooking all day. When you drop fast wind on top of unstable air, you get shear, wind that changes speed and direction as you go up. Shear is the ingredient that takes an ordinary thunderstorm and organizes it, tilts it, and lets it survive for hours instead of collapsing in 20 minutes. A storm that survives for hours is a storm that can grow a rotating core, throw down large hail, blast out damaging straight-line winds, and in the worst case, drop a tornado. And the fuel this weekend is there. Ahead of the front, temperatures have been climbing into the 90s and hundreds, and that heat is not separate from the storms. It is the fuel for them. The hotter and more humid the air the front runs into, the more explosively it destabilizes. The same ridge that is baking the region is loading the atmosphere for what comes next. Heat and storms are not two stories here either. They are the same story, read from two ends. The Storm Prediction Center has been tracking this for days. A belt of enhanced flow riding the periphery of that strong upper high, running from the northern plains into the Great Lakes, with a disturbance and a trailing front swinging through and setting off rounds of severe storms across the middle of the country this weekend and into the start of next week. Damaging wind is the headline threat from organized clusters. Large hail is on the table. And where the spin in the low levels lines up, a few tornadoes become possible too, as the threat shifts east toward the Great Lakes. Now, I'm going to be straight with you about the uncertainty, because that is the whole point of this channel, and because you should be suspicious of anyone who isn't. The exact placement of the worst storms this far out is not locked in. The Storm Prediction Center itself has flagged that low-level winds are veered in a way that adds uncertainty, meaning the difference between scattered strong storms and a widespread organized outbreak still depends on details that won't resolve until the day itself. The ingredients are clearly there. The precise target is not. Anyone giving you a confident county-by-county tornado forecast 4 days out is selling you something. What I can tell you with confidence is the pattern. The ridge is parked, the rim is running, the fuel is in place, and the disturbances are lined up to ride it into the most populated part of the country's midsection. That is phase number 3, and it is the one to watch develop over the next 72 hours. And then there is the fourth phase, out over the Pacific, because this pattern's reach does not stop at the coastline. While the ridge does all of this over the mainland, its circulation extends out over the ocean. And out there, Hurricane Fausto is on the move toward Hawaii. The National Hurricane Center has it on a steady track toward the islands, expected to weaken to a tropical storm and pass near the northern part of the state around the middle of next week, coming closest to Kauai. The same large-scale pressure pattern that governs where the mainland ridge sits is part of what steers systems like Fausto across the Pacific. It is a reminder that when we talk about the pattern, we are not talking about one region's weather. We are talking about the shape of the entire atmosphere over the country and the ocean around it. And right now, that shape is stacked against us on 4 fronts at once. So step back and look at the whole board. The south is flooding. The west and south are baking under a heat wave with no end in the forecast. The middle of the country is loading for a severe weather outbreak this weekend, and a hurricane is closing on Hawaii. 4 hazards thousands of miles apart, and one single feature, a stuck ridge of high pressure, connecting every one of them. That is why I call this one of the most dangerous weather weeks the country has seen in a while. Not because any single piece is unprecedented, but because all of them are happening at once, driven by the same thing, over almost the entire country. Now, anytime this much happens at once, the same claim shows up. That someone is doing this, that the pattern was built or steered or engineered. And I want to answer that directly with physics because the instinct behind it is actually understandable. It really does look coordinated. 4 disasters, 1 week, 1 structure. Your brain is wired to see a plan in that. There's even a name for it. Apophenia, the tendency to perceive intention in events that only appear connected. But the connection here is real, and it is meteorological, not deliberate. And the reason it cannot be manufactured is a matter of raw energy. The ridge driving this covers a large fraction of a continent and extends miles up into the atmosphere. The energy stored and moved by a feature that size is astronomically larger than anything human technology can produce. Not twice as much, not 10 times, but many orders of magnitude beyond the entire electrical output of civilization. Cloud seeding is a real technology, and all it can do is coax a little extra rain out of a cloud that is already there and already about to rain. It cannot build a continental ridge. It cannot stall a front. It cannot set the temperature of an ocean or bend the path of a hurricane. What we are watching is a powerful but completely explainable configuration of the atmosphere, the kind that shows up every so often, made a little more intense by a warmer baseline, and nothing more exotic than that. There is a second thing worth clearing up because it sounds like a contradiction, and it isn't. This was forecast to be a below normal Atlantic hurricane season, and yet, here we are in July, already on our second named storm, with a hurricane near Hawaii on top of it. People take that as the forecast failing. It isn't. A seasonal outlook predicts the total count of storms over the whole season. It says nothing about any single one, and it says nothing about impacts. A below normal season is not a quiet season. It is a season with fewer entries in the book. 1992 was a below normal season by that count, and it produced Hurricane Andrew, one of the most destructive storms in American history. The number of storms and the damage they do are almost independent. It only takes one in the wrong place. So here is what to actually watch over the next few days. So you are ahead of this instead of behind it. Watch the overnight low temperatures across the west and the south. If they stay in the upper 70s night after night, that is when heat illness starts stacking up in the vulnerable, the elderly, the very young. anyone without working air conditioning. That is the quiet emergency. Watch whether the Storm Prediction Center upgrades its risk levels for the weekend as the day gets closer and confidence rises. An upgrade is the tell that the outbreak is coming together rather than falling apart. Watch the flood threat across the south, not the tropical storm's name, which is already gone, but the stalled front, which is not. As long as it sits there, the water keeps coming. And watch Fausto's track toward Hawaii and whether it holds together or weakens before it arrives. And the practical part, because information is only worth anything if it changes what you do. If you are under the heat, check on elderly neighbors and anyone without air conditioning, because they are who this pattern actually kills. And if your home is not cooling off after dark, get somewhere that does. If you are in the storm zone this weekend, know where you will shelter before the sky turns, not after. And if you are anywhere near the flooding, the overwhelming majority of flood deaths in this country happen in vehicles, to people who thought the water across the road was shallower than it was. If you cannot see the pavement, you do not know what is under it. Turn around. Let me leave you with the real question underneath all of this. The one I genuinely cannot answer yet. Is this week a fluke? An extreme but essentially random alignment of a stuck ridge over exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time? The kind of thing that happens once in a while and then passes. Or is it a preview? An early legible signature of an atmosphere that is getting better and better at stacking heat, flood, and storm on top of one another and parking the whole thing over a continent that has to live underneath it. 1 week does not answer that, but the pattern behind this week, the stubborn, blocking, slow-moving ridge, is exactly the kind of setup that a growing body of research suggests may be showing up more often. I am not going to tell you that is settled, because it isn't, and anyone who tells you it is certain is getting ahead of the science. What I will tell you is that this specific shape, this stuck dome configuration, is worth learning to recognize, because if you understand the ridge, you understand the whole week, and you will see the next one coming before the headlines do. That is the goal here. Not to scare you, but to hand you the one idea that makes the chaos legible. One ridge. 4 faces. A country caught underneath it. I will be tracking every piece of this as it develops. Stay with us and stay ready.